starting our third session for today, which is on sports talent. This session is presented by GoSports Foundation, which is an independent donor-funded venture. It supports 105 of India's most promising junior athletes. We have one panel for this session, which will discuss the manner in which the public sector, private enterprises, and civil society can fuel India's Olympic aspirations. First up, I invite Commander Rajesh Rajagopalan, CEO of the Top Scheme. Deepthi Bopaiah, Executive Director of the GoSports Foundation. Neha Aggarwal, Head of Partnership and Communication at Olympic Gold Quest. Mustafa Ghouse, CEO of JSW Sports. And the discussion will be moderated by Sharda Ugra.
Good afternoon, everyone. We all know post-lunch sessions are the toughest, so pretend this is a test match innings for about 5 minutes and then you'll be hooked into the conversation. I just want all of you to look at the panel that's sitting to my left. There are two competitive India athletes in Asian Games, medalist, an Olympian, an MBA who played state hockey for Karnataka. Tennis for Karnataka, sorry. And Commander is from, of course, the Navy, which means he's a military man. He's also been a sailor. Everyone thinks cricket is my favorite sport. Actually, sailing has always been. It's my best assignment of all time. So the discussion we are going to have here, I'll just explain to you that everyone said a couple of sessions ago the broadcasters were being congratulated for being the most important thing in professional sports, and they certainly think so themselves. To my mind, as a journalist, next year it will be 30 years as a sports journalist in India. I think one of the big game changers in how Indian sports was managed, run and organized was the onset and the creation, say about 10 years ago, of these private non-profits that decided that our federations really weren't doing a great job, so let us do it. Let's come and literally look at the best athletes that we have and give them the best treatment that we possibly can. So it started with the Mittal's Champions Trust, with the steel magnate Lakshmi Mittal. It started with him. Olympic Gold Quest, who Neha works for, was the next to follow. GoSports Foundation is one of those with a slightly different approach. There's an Anglian Medal Trust, and JSW Sports has come onto the scene, say around 2012, Mustafa, if I'm right. What they have done is that they have taken just last week a new step. They have founded the first private academy funded by private money and not Sarkar, to train India's Olympic athletes in a center of excellence where I have to confess it's nothing like I've seen before. So you have a mix of people here, and there is no bureaucrat and there is no politician on the stage. So please remember, that's an important thing. It's part of the sports law which the BCCI has fought against. But you can see when you hear the discussions as they go along. I think firstly, what is also another very important part of this afternoon is that they're all sitting on the same place and they are not fighting with each other. They're talking, some of them are rivals in a way as well, but there's no argument, there's going to be no rancor. They have, apparently it is being said and told to me before I began this, is that there is now an understanding of how Indian sports needs to go and what direction it needs to go, how you can actually jump over all the pitfalls and all the hurdles that are in the way. Let me start with Commander, since he's a military person. You have to get your protocol right with the military. When you have just come into the top scheme, which is Target Olympic Podium. It's a top scheme. It's a government funding of the top athletes. You select them, you pick them, you name them. The discussion as to why you picked them, why you haven't, why they're off the list is separate. When you came into this program, as a former sort of sports person yourself, what was your judgment of what the scene was like with reference to the private, the non-profits that were there? And what do you think needed to be done from the point of view of the government? Was it almost a compliment you paid them by, the top scheme paid them by setting up the program and going and getting along its way?
The moment I took over, I realized that there are people who are doing the same job as TOPS is doing, and I realized that there is a requirement for these organizations to be there in the space, because the sheer fact that an athlete in India does not come from those backgrounds where they have the wherewithal to individually look into everything. So they require that. And of course, TOPS, the genesis of TOPS was basically government is funding. They have an annual calendar for training and competition, but it was not a focused approach. And that is where we thought that we are all doing the same job, so why can't we collaborate? And slowly and steadily, I think the second day in my job, I met Deepthi and we got talking, and I said, I think we should have a dialogue because we are all working in the same direction. The objective is same, to see the Indian flag going up and at the Olympics, and let's get talking. And slowly and steadily, we got talking. I met Viren thereafter, and we saw space to work together and collaborate. And thereafter, of course, Mustafa and me, we've been meeting off and on at various fora, and the end result of that was that we sent a joint team to Tokyo on 25th of July to do a preliminary study that how we can support our athletes the best. And I think it was a great initiative on all our part. And the sheer fact that we are all on the same side.
Let me put this question to Deepthi, who's been, you come from outside sport, even though you did play sort of competitive tennis. When you came into the scenario of having to deal with how athletes have to be trained, GoSports has a very unique approach as compared to, say, what OGQ has or what the Mittal's Champions Trust was. If you could just explain to the audience what GoSports was doing, and I'll ask Mustafa to take that on from there and talk about their approach.
So I think at GoSports, the philosophy is about trying to really support excellence. We're using sports as the vehicle for excellence. We believe that there's a lot of talent in this country. I think 10 years back when we started, the issue was, does India as a country have enough talent? And I think all those myths have been busted in the last 10 years. Can women play? We see medalists who are women now, and are differently abled athletes, just disabled in that sense. So I think what our philosophy has really been to support them at the right time, give them the required guidance, and also look at life after sport through our education programs. So I think in that aspect, we're really looking at a holistic way of working with athletes. Each of our organizations have very, very different visions and perspectives, but ultimately, like Commander said, it is to put India on the world sporting map and see our flag fly high.
Of the athletes that are here on the stage, Mustafa is the oldest. The athletes are so I'm asking you from the point of view that Mustafa is a medalist at the Asian Games himself. He'll deny it, but it's true. You can check it. Mustafa, when you started out playing and when you went to these multi-discipline games, what was your memory of it as you sort of stepped into the JSW platform? What did you think needed to be absolutely not like what it was when you were competing?
I'm too old, I can't remember. No, so I think the difference was that as an athlete growing up in a big city like Bombay, it's very difficult to be able to understand all the requirements that are needed to be a professional athlete. I was lucky that I came from a family that had former tennis players as well, so my dad and my uncles could guide me in a manner which was probably better than someone who had just picked up the sport in an ad hoc manner. So I had a bit of an advantage, and also at a relatively young age of 14, 15, I got the opportunity to go for a couple of weeks to train abroad, which was an eye-opener for me, because what we thought we were doing in India and were doing very well was nowhere close to what was happening globally. And that kind of set the tone of how my approach to the sport went on, and how I kept in touch with all my coaches, how I kept in touch with all my trainers, and even at that stage where there was no internet and no WhatsApp to really communicate, trying to make sure that we were doing what was needed to be at an international level. But not everybody has that, and that's the first thing that I presented to the JSW group when they asked me what should we do to help Indian sports people, Indian Olympians really perform better. And I was that we need to provide world-class infrastructure and world-class training to athletes when they're 12, 13, 14 years old, because that's when you need it the most. Not much can be done when you're 19, 20, or even 25 sometimes, because you're already set in your ways. You can't change your technical training. You can only get slightly better physically, you can probably get better mentally, but you can't change your foundation work. And that's the whole thought process with which we have set up the institute, that we want the 12, 13-year-olds to get the right type of coaching and the right type of foundation work, so that when you are at that level of competing internationally, you're not feeling second fiddle. You're not overwhelmed by the situation. When I remember when I went abroad for many tournaments, and Andy Murray was 16, 17, and he had an entourage of like 6 guys around him. Or Sharda Ugra would be at the same tournament. She would have God knows how many people looking after her, and technically that's how it has to be. You're as an athlete, you need to worry about training, you need to worry about competing. You're not supposed to worry about your flight tickets or which hotel you're supposed to stay at, or what time you're going to get your visa, passports back. That's not your job. So we want to remove all of that, and let the athletes focus on what they need to focus on. And I think the differentiator over here is that he's come into the role that he's at right now. All of us were on the same page for a long time, but he's come and bridged the gap, and I think that's a very positive step for us to achieve what we all want to achieve, because we three can't do it without him.
Neha was the first woman to compete at an Olympics in table tennis, so I think you should give her a little round of applause.
I'll just correct that, youngest, not
youngest,
the first.
Youngest,
yeah,
okay,
yeah.
10 years ago, and in Beijing you were the only one. In Beijing she was the only one. I'm not going to ask how young she is. Right here. I'm much older than you, Mustafa. I'm confessing right here. I've covered Mustafa when he used to play tennis, so I know him from then. So Neha, when you came into the Olympic Gold Quest, which is the oldest of the non-profits at the moment that's functioning, it's sort of driven by a former hockey captain, Geet Sethi and Prakash Padukone are involved in it. So it is a very sport-centric organization. In that sense, Neha herself is a former athlete. When you came into it and you saw what it was, what did you see that was showing you that there were signs of improvement and that there were things happening?
Well, till now, so I just completed 1 year at OGQ, and every day I just feel that, oh my God, I wish I was still an athlete and I was supported by OGQ. I think it's the kind of approach towards focusing on the specifics, right? When I was playing, I had this one incident, 3 months before the Commonwealth Championships in 2013, I had a back injury, and for 10 days I didn't know what doctor I should go to, and that really slowed down just the whole process of understanding what it is and what I need to do and need to compete in a big tournament like Commonwealth Championships in 3 months. That's what we ensure that, I saw that at OGQ, we are really laying importance to the specifics. We are there for the athletes at the right place, at the right time, and the team is such that the team is able to bring in really credible people with the right mindset, I would say. The athlete is always at heart. That is the prime importance. We are obsessed with it. We are obsessed with the dream to see the Indian flag go high and get another medal for India at the Olympics. And people like Adit Sethi or Prakash Padukone get in the right vision, the right mindset, the right expertise that needs to be done to take care of an athlete.
Commander Rajagopalan, I want to ask you now, when you see, so you've come into the top scheme 8 months ago. What about sort of say what these three organizations were able to do, or the non-profits were able to do? What about it you thought needed to sort of work in government as well, needed to put into government, and the way they dealt with? I mean, the NSDF, just correct me if I'm wrong, is part of how athletes are funded in that sense. And there is more that is the top scheme brings to it. But what about it did you see in the methods that they followed that you thought government could benefit from it?
Just to correct, TOPS is funded by NSDF, right? And the funding comes for all the program for the athlete assistance through NSDF. Of course, prior to I joined, TOPS was there. TOPS was started in 2014. That was just prior to Rio. And the focus was that let's provide that additional funding for a focus training, or if an athlete requires more than what has been planned by the government under ACTC, that should be provided through TOPS. But unfortunately, we had a committee of really acclaimed sportsperson or sports administrators, but there was nobody to work behind the scene to get the data, to do all the processes, to put in the standard operating procedures. There was none. So that is where we started, and we realized that these three organizations were doing it very well, right? And we thought we could learn from them, we could work together, and that is where we have now brought in, we have restructured TOPS to bring in a proper professional organization in place, which will look into a long-term plan rather than just doing it in bits and pieces where athlete sends a proposal which is not even scrutinized properly. Does it fall within the long-term plan, and will it benefit the athlete? After the training, is there a report generated where we can actually assess or we can review the whole process? Are we doing it correctly? Or do we? Is there analysis of it? Are there any shortcomings which we are trying to, so that kind of system we are trying to bring in place, and which I think we have learned from them, and probably bring in more method to the madness.
The NSDF is the National Sports Development Fund, which is money that any citizen of the country or corporate can put into the government to support sport in any way. The sports minister, Colonel Rajvardhan Rathore, got his Olympic program sponsored by NSDF funding by filling in forms in triplicate or quadruplicate or whatever he had to. He got 66 lakh rupees and he went out and he won the first silver medal. Is there stuff, that you think that government should be allowed to do, should be allowed to have, because they're the ones that supply, I was told, more than 95
About 90 to 95%.
90 to 95% of the funding in sport comes from government.
So I think, like Mustafa also indicated, that all of us can keep doing what we're doing, but if the maximum support actually comes in from the government, because the place of training and from the start, from probably when the athlete is much younger, they're within the system, of the Sports Authority of India. So I think the government plays an extremely critical role in that sense. But what organizations like us have really been able to do is provide that just-in-time support. Because when an athlete gets injured, for example, you cannot follow a paperwork process, then find the right doctor, then get your injury sorted out. You'll have to be able to do it at that moment so that they can actually get better and participate in an event. I just like to quote something that happened at the Commonwealth Games, which was really heartening for us to be involved in, is our weightlifter Satish. Just about 48 hours before the event, his entire lower half of his body went numb. And the good part was that we were able to get in support immediately and were able to get him to lift and win that gold. In fact, he was going to pull out of the event. Now that happened because there was someone on ground. We had the permission of TOPS and the weightlifting federation, and we all collaborated and we were there for the athlete at the right time. So I don't think it's one particular organization who can do anything on their own, but it can only happen through collaboration. And at the end of the day, it is for the athlete. You want them to not worry about different things that are going on. You want them to just go and play and focus and concentrate on their sport, so that all the back end and the administration and whatever is required for them to improve performance is taken care of. And also in terms of sports science, I think a lot of our athletes in the past have done it despite the system, and that's something we keep using very loosely. But in the last 6 to 8, 10 years, I think there are different entities, corporate money has started coming in, the government has started funding, and we're able to really make a lot more meaningful interventions in that sense. So I think ultimately we will move forward and grow forward only through collaboration, keeping the athlete at the center of it.
One of the sort of the elephant in the room at this moment are the federations. We're not talking about them, but they are central to what they are able to give to the athletes by way of even having a systematic calendar of events or a season or whatever, which doesn't exist in 95% of or 99% of the federations that there are. There is no sustained schematic calendar where athletes can actually take part in. Sports Authority of India has been criticized enormously for many reasons for which they deserve to be criticized, but there is much credit that must be given to them for the amount of athletes they just churn out through what one of the coaches sadly said is group coaching, but through the system. So one of the people at the Sai Center in Guwahati said to me that, look, we can produce our athletes, we can produce our football players, we can produce our archers, but they have to have events to compete in. So if there are no events, what are they going to do? Why do they have to go abroad to be able to compete? How do you work with, and of course the question of the federations being asked questions itself is very difficult because as sports governance, if you heard the session, the first session yesterday, it was about that how can you demand anything of federations that say we are autonomous and therefore we are not accountable. How do you deal with federations? I'm going back to Mustafa. How do you deal with I'll ask all the four of you. So let's start at that end.
Okay. No, I mean it's not easy. I think some are slightly better than the others. I will have to say that when we were playing, we used to think that it was very tough dealing with the AITA, but after I stopped playing tennis, I think it's probably the best sport that I was in. But yeah, it isn't easy. There is no. They need professionalism first and foremost. There needs to be an understanding of why they're there and what their objective is, and then they have to be held accountable for it. Right? I don't think any federation is held accountable for a poor performance. Every 4 years, I think all of us would lose our jobs if we didn't deliver. But that's not the case when it comes to federations. So I think that's the first thing that we would like to see differently, that there is a sense of accountability to what they have to do and ownership for what they're trying to do, and then life would be a lot easier for Indian sport. But right now, yeah, they are integral with what is happening. As much as three of us can work, and as much as Commander can bulldoze his way through, they are still integral with what an athlete has to do. So yeah, I mean, it's not easy because there is no plan, like you mentioned. There is no understanding of when an athlete needs to do what. There is no junior development plan. There is no schedule in terms of competitions. It's non-existent. I mean, what do I say?
The only reason I mentioned that particular incident of Commonwealth is because that was that one time when the federation asked, everybody on ground came together and were able to help the athlete. Because if there was that ego in between, we would have lost that gold medal. That was at stake. And it was too short a time to think about anything else, and whoever could provide that support was able to do it. But I think, yes, accountability, because as much as all these systems are going to be put in place, ultimately, if the athlete's entry is not sent on time, what do you do then? The athlete, for example, Asian Games, they didn't know some of the sports didn't know till 4 days back if they were going for the Asian Games or not. Now, these are things that we can come so far, but at the end of the day, yes, the federation needs to be a little bit more accountable, and if the government can put in that pressure and ensure that transparency and accountability is asked for and demanded in some sense, I think then we are definitely going to see these medals come through.
No, absolutely. Just building on to what Deepthi and Mustafa is saying, that I think there's a big need of having the retired athletes, the actual people who understand the system. We need to absorb them back into it. And that is when, they would really understand what is the urgency and what is to be done and why it is to be done. So I think if we could have that sort of a system, even in a couple of sports, even one athlete and in one federation, I think it would be a game changer. But I would also say that in a couple of sports, the times are changing. Federations are looking up. They are understanding the need, and if we are not collaborating, if at all we are not able to understand the needs of each other's journeys, then we won't see the medal, we won't see the athlete at the podium. So I think there is a slight change, but then we still do have a long way to go.
I like the way I like the way Mustafa uses the word bulldozed, right?
Torpedo.
Or torpedoed, as Sharda is saying. Certainly not. There's no requirement. There's no enemy there, first of all. Having said that, I would not deny that there is a certain trust deficit, and it can only happen, that gap can only close if we have more dialogues like this. We come on a common platform, talk to each other, because unless we talk to each other, things will remain same. Because we all know at the end of the day, the objective is same, to get a medal for the country. And since last 8 months, I've been interacting with Federation. I probably interact more with Federation than 3 of them. And because all my athletes belong to some federation, and generally the approval the recommendations have to come from them also. So we do talk. And I can tell you that there are a lot of federations there who really come on board, willingly discuss with you, and we sort of, like the way Deepthi said, today we have an athlete who's injured, who's one of our brightest prospects for Olympics. We have taken a combined decision, that is, that athlete is with OGQ, we federation together with sports science people who are from a different organization than these 3, who are also contributing a lot towards the sport. So we all come together and we're trying to sort that out so that she is there, fit and fine, and get her first medal at 2020. So it's not that it is not possible. It's just that more dialogue has to happen. And it's happening. That's what we were talking during the lunchtime, that sport certainly is at an inflection point. But everyone has to contribute, and it can happen. I don't believe that it is not possible.
Actually add here, really lament the work that the Table Tennis Federation has done. You all must be aware of, the great achievements at the Commonwealth Games. For the first time, table tennis won a medal in each and every event we took part. And hands down, we have to say the Federation has done a fantastic job in terms of giving the right support, in terms of getting the right coach back into the system. The same coach which produced results in the 2010 Commonwealth Games was gotten back. and he again produced results. And also getting the right funding for the athletes, sending them for good planned training program prior to the Commonwealth Games, and we saw the results clearly. And if that can be replicated for by other federations as well, we could really have massive success.
And Neha, how much of that, of the fact that table tennis was able to turn this around, even though it sounds very quick, but it must have taken several years. How much of it had to do with the fact that Kamlesh Mehta, who's himself a former player, national champion, has competed for India for so many games, that he was involved in it? How much of that was part of it?
I think Kamlesh Mehta's involvement with 11 Sports has really helped because they've been able to get a new league in place, which was much needed. Now table tennis players, are there on Star Sports. That was always the dream to be, and there are audience. They know us. I mean, Manika Batra is a new star, and what 11 Sports has done to bring in a new table tennis league, which to me looks like a good sustained model. And secondly, they got international top athletes. So for the Indian athletes to rub shoulders with them, live train with them for 3 weeks altogether is an eye opener. See them how they train, what they eat, what is their regime before training, after training, while match. Just see the whole mindset is an eye opener. So his involvement with the 11 Sports has conceptualized this new league and has made a huge difference to Indian table tennis.
One of the things that was said to me by Geet Sethi many years ago, he said, that bodies like ours, the non-profits, we don't want to be there. But if you're not going to do your work, we will be here. He was speaking about the larger sort of administration of sport. He said, we don't need to be here. Make us redundant. Let us go. Let the system work. Make us redundant. But, so Commander, I wanted to ask you, when you came into you always have followed sports. When you came into the system, how difficult was it to sort of break through barriers with the old sort of established powers that are there? And I'm sure it's far easier to have a conversation with Mustafa, Deepthi, or anyone from OGQ, whether it's Neha, Aggarwal, whoever, and with people who've had in an office for like 30 years, 40 years, who think it's their little Jagir.
I like the word Jagir. Yeah. It wasn't easy. First of all, for them to accept someone new coming and trying to make things happen, because change is, very difficult in any organization. It is not only a question of sports, because there is an insecurity of losing your own power, losing your, say in a particular sport. So first thing, what I did was trying to make them feel safe. And I feel it was not that I'm going to come and take over their role, or because we are very clear, either in the government or in SAI, that federations or IOA or our own staff at SAI, that the thing is that everyone has its place. We are very clear. We just want the transparency and accountability, and that can only happen if everything comes on the table. So even like a selection criteria. So we said, why don't you declare if you are doing it right, where's the harm in publishing it or putting it on your website, so that there are no players who feel aggrieved, because it was already there. There were cases in the court during Asian Games. Unfortunate. But in quite a few of the cases, the court took cognizance of that the federation had put the selection criteria much in advance, few of them, and therefore the verdict was in their favor. So that is what we want the federations to do, and slowly and steadily, because there is a far larger scrutiny by the media or the public at large, and public has become more aware of things happening. So everyone has to mend ways, and they are doing it. I wouldn't say that they are not doing it, but I wouldn't say that it is to the desirable level, but it's always a slow process, and things are happening.
I now want to ask sort of the three of you, how did dialogues amongst yourselves begin? How did you start sort of having conversations with GoSports when, with OGQ or when Mustafa came in? Or how did those conversations happen? Because again, you are essentially on the same page. Maybe your sort of the age groups that you're looking at or whatever, that's different. But how did those conversations begin? Was it difficult?
I think the sad part today is that the number of experts that we all have access to are very limited. So one of the first few reasons you're actually reaching out to each other is to understand who is this expert, who is the best nutritionist, who is the best sports science expert that is there that you can actually reach out to. So initial conversations were really regarding that. There were no such forums as such to bring us all together, but I think we always had conversations going, but it was not regular. It was at time of need or just want to discuss, opinion. Mustafa, we know each other, so yes, we keep talking. But otherwise, I think there was no structured way of dialogue happening. But I think experts to understand if you have somebody or there's another athlete. I think Mustafa and I, there are certain sports that they work with, and there are certain sports that we work with, and we also work with differently abled athletes and some gymnasts. So every time he comes across a really good talent in gymnastics or a differently abled athlete, he immediately, talks to us about it and says, can you look at this person? Is there something that you can do? So collaboration is happening at those levels at this point of time. But yes, today, now that their center is up and ready, it's a world-class facility. There is no reason why if we can fund a few of our athletes to go there and train one of the best facilities, you will still do that. So I think the way forward is really collaboration. It did not happen too much, but I see that change coming about.
Neha, I want to ask you, like she's saying that the experts in the field are very limited. In that sense, do you start to find, even Mustafa, I'll address this to you, that the talent that you're looking for, that talent pool, is it smaller than we think or is it actually bigger than we think? That there are, that there's an athlete for each of you in every sport, every discipline, every age group, whatever.
I think talent-wise, we do have the talent, and we have to accept that the talent is not in our Delhi or Bombay. The talent lies in a Jind, in a Sonipat, in the remote parts of our country. The challenge is how do we spot that talent? And the bigger challenge is that when we spot that talent, how do we get in that athlete into the mainstream system and groom that athlete to become a world-class player. So I think talent-wise, India is there, but the experts that are needed to groom those talented athletes, I would say we need much more experts, and the reason why we don't have them is because we're essentially not a sporting country. When I was trying to do a sports management program after I retired from competitive table tennis, I didn't see a good one in India which could really then help me hone those skills. So I don't really blame the dearth of those experts to help our talents, but then yes, we need to have some platform for expert education, not only like experts not only in the management but also in sports science and such other areas.
Yeah, lunch has been very tough on Mustafa. No, the question of what kind of sort of the talent that you're looking at, is the talent pool smaller? Is it larger? Are there enough athletes to go around with all the various bodies that there are?
Yeah, there are not enough bodies to look after the athletes, and we look at only 4 or 5 different sports. They look at a few sports. They look at probably a few more sports. So we're not overlapping in most senses, but yeah, there's just so much talent out there. Hima Das came out of nowhere, right? And 18 months ago she was playing football. So the fact that these athletes are available and they're there somewhere in the country, but we don't have the scouting network to really reach to the deeper parts of India, because there is no competitive environment for them. There's no system where they are competing on a regular basis for people to at least get the first glimpse of them and then evaluate whether they have the ability to go further or not. So, yeah, I mean, there's no doubt about the talent that's there in the country. It's a question of how collectively there is a system put in place to identify these athletes and then give them what is needed to really excel at the international stage.
So is it that you're looking for a particular kind of sport and at a particular kind of age, and that you need to have scouts, many more scouts that are able to do this? Is that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for us, we saw Neeraj Chopra 3 years before he today, and he was not national champion at that time. But the stuff that our coaches saw, we sent videos abroad to understand whether experts abroad thought he was up to par to be special, and then we started putting a system in place to support him. So, but that's one off. I mean, we can't do that all the time. I mean, similar like how Deepthi mentioned, she and my common friend Hemandua sent me a message of, hey, there's this long jumper kid who's my neighbor, and can you look at him? Can you support him? We sent him to LA for 6 weeks. The coaches there thought he was amazing, and he's Tejaswin Shankar, who in his freshman year has won the NCAA. So these are not how you should be finding talent, right? This is fluke. So we need to find a better system to find talent. That's the bottom line, right? And unfortunately, we don't have it right now. We're not just three organizations, and like Neha mentioned, very few experts who can actually scout and know what's required. Makes it very difficult.
Okay, I would like to add there, of course, it requires huge manpower to do something like talent hunt, and it's not a one-off kind of system. It has to be a proper systemic thing. And Khelo India was conceptualized as a program to address this issue itself. Why I know is because I was deeply involved with the talent identification and development team. Rather, I was the one who created all these small teams of ex-players and coaches of Arjuna awardees and Dronacharya. And amazing talent was seen during Khelo India school games. And when they went for talent hunt to hinterlands, when they came back, they couldn't stop talking of this raw talent out there in India. So talent is not a problem, but you need to have a system. You need to have an entire ecosystem around it. So what Deepthi was also saying, and Neha was saying, that it is not the raw talent which is missing, it is the support system around that which is missing and which needs to develop. And I'm sure if Khelo India implemented properly, would create that entire ecosystem of sports in India.
I was just told that time is up, or I was going to ask each of them what they think the challenges are for talent identification. I'm sure we have time to hear from all of them. And there's a question there. So I'll start with you. What are the biggest, like you have just said that you need an ecosystem around it. So when, you're the government, when is it coming?
Okay. The biggest lacuna which we see right now is the sports science infrastructure as well as the manpower, human resource in India. By and large, if you see, most of the organizations have support from abroad, and that can't be a sustainable, sustainable system for any country. So we are trying to address that. We are in talks with leading universities abroad to set up as well as handholding till our own manpower gets trained. And of course, the in-house which is there already, maybe from India or from abroad, which a lot of organizations have with them, we are trying to engage them also. Second thing is the entire national coaching development framework. We are trying to address that also because there is a requirement to address that where it has to be at all three levels. That is the grassroots, the developmental and elite. Everyone thinks about the elite, but nobody thinks about the grassroots, and that is where we need to address. You can't have a high performance director coming only at the elite level. You need to have them even at the grassroots level, because once, as I think Mustafa said, that if an athlete learns a wrong technique, it takes years to correct that. You have to unlearn that to learn, and by the time has passed by. So we are doing that, where our own coaches are straight away put, the best of them are put with the national camps where they can interact with the elite athletes, learn under the foreign coaches or our Indian top coaches, and then they come back and teach or get into grassroots coaching or the developmental and elite athletes.
Neha, just a quick summary. What do you think are the challenges that, say, OGQ faces in the kind of work that they do?
I think
TV, 20 seconds.
Yeah, no, I think in terms of talent for OGQ, it is the transition. We now have about 90 or so athletes who are under the age of 16, whom we are grooming for 2024 and 28. But how do you transition in the right way, right? You need to have smooth processes. There has to be good planning. There has to be the right coach for that athlete, and we should be then able to provide that support system, so that retention and then moving to the next level of excellence is what is really needed to have these young athletes reach at the Olympic stage.
I think challenges, we're going to have a lot of talent coming out, and because of all these systems being put in place, I think one of the challenges that we are already trying to address is from the athlete education standpoint, and really completing the circle for the athlete. What are they going to do with shorter careers today? How are they actually going to come back into the system if they want to come back? So how do you educate them? How do you give them the skill sets to come back and contribute back into the ecosystem and continue to keep them in the ecosystem? So I think that is something we have to start addressing as soon as possible, because you're going to see a fair number of senior athletes retiring from sports. So what do they do post-sport, right? Some of them have jobs, but a lot of them don't probably want to do that and probably can be very successful in other jobs, to give back to sport in some sense. So we are actually very fortunate to have Abhinav, Rahul, Dravid and Gopichand guide us on these aspects, because they are few of the people actually giving back to sport in such a large way. So I think that's an area that we feel we can really contribute to.
I think they need specialization in every stage, from literally the time that you have to scout an athlete to them going to the Olympics. It's a science now. It's no longer opportunity to, like Abhinav mentioned when we were there 2 days ago, that his whole career is an experiment, and that's not how it should be. You have to be systematically progressing from the time you are 10, 11. That's how global sport is, and until we start doing that, we're not going to be a sporting powerhouse that we all want to be. And hopefully, Commander can make us all redundant in the future.
Yeah, just some questions. There was someone, was it Neeru? Was it you? Okay. Neeru.
No, I'm going to ask the very basic question. Part of the whole system in SAI are some very unsung people like the project officers for individual sport. Now, is their job, you talked about manpower, how much is required to kind of also make them more professional or more modern in their thinking towards liaisoning with the various federations or various sport? Because is it their job just to kind of fill up forms, make sure the letters are here, they go from point A to B? Can you just talk about them? Because they are the most unheard of people otherwise in the entire SAI setup.
Absolutely. Thank you for that question, because you raised a very pertinent one. Project officers, for people who don't know, are the ones who are absolutely related with these sports. They have played that sport, they have been coaches before that, and they actually do the entire management of that particular sport inside, right? And they are unheard of because they are not with the athlete on the ground, so they are not seen, and they are experts in their own right, and they are the one who bridge the gap between federation, SAI, IOA, with the non-profit organizations like OGQ and Go and JSW, and they are at it. But what happens is, since they get used to working in a particular system, the change needs to be brought in to keep in step with the the way sports is moving in the country as well as in the world. So, especially with the present minister, he's been very particular that because he's been an athlete, he's seen these sport, project officers, he's interacted with them day in day out, and he's very clear that they should be leveraged because they have very good relationship with the federations. So they should be leveraged to close the gap, and we conduct a lot of workshops. We have just started that. Of course, that initiative is a new one to make them more, more capable of handling both sides of the coin.
Yeah, just a question at the back. That's also a journalist.
So we've spoken about all the stakeholders, but from an athlete point of view, how much necessary is to have, I mean, for the lack of better way of putting it, the IQ level and the awareness. When we look at athletes from other countries, they are aware, they can think, they can improvise. Do you think that bit is missing in our athletes?
Who's the question for me?
Anyone from the panel can take it, maybe the three of them.
Yeah, I do agree with you, Mir, that a lot of the times our athletes are not as educated as they should be because they come from very rural backgrounds, and education is not a priority for them. They just know their respective sport and that's all they care about. But that's not how it should be. They need to be educated, and more importantly, they need to be in control of their careers. And that's something that we try to keep telling our kids, that they need to be aware of what decisions are being made for them, and they should be integral in making those decisions going forward, because at the end of the day, we're all here as a support system. We're not on the mat, or we're not in the ring or on the track competing. So it's very important that we also work towards having more intelligent athletes. It helps in decision making in their respective sport in pressure situations, and also in their own career planning and their own growth as individuals. So yes, we do need to put systems in place to make our athletes more intelligent and more educated.
So just to add to that, Mir, this is where I see the biggest role of non-profit organizations to educate their athletes, to make them financially sound, because the athlete's shelf life is the smallest, I think. Because and post game, it's so heartening to see Neha sitting here, who's post her playing days has gone and got her education in sports management done, and she's back in the game and she's contributing to the Indian sports. So this is a very important aspect. Education, you cannot say that education is separate and sport is separate. They are pretty intelligent people. If they are an international athlete, they are very intelligent people. But that has to be, consolidated with formal education also. And towards that, we are also creating a kind of workshop for them, which is like an education workshop where we teach them to become a better ambassador for the country. Leadership, qualities and motivation, as well as something about your anti-doping, because that is too prevalent in the country. So we're creating that kind of a workshop for our top athletes, and we will certainly slowly and steadily move it down to all the campus in the country.
Suddenly the questions are coming in a rash. Okay, last two. One second, Mike, please.
Yeah, hello. So, a question for anyone of you. So, basically, taking cue from that question, like the players, there's a gap in the education and stuff, and so they basically they will not be knowing what exactly would be the best thing for them. So do we think there the role of agents of players, like we have outside, like player agents or the people who represent the players in the transactions as we see, but then here in India maybe they can represent them in all those matters wherein they might not have the like adequate education right at this moment. So do we see the role of player agents coming in at this juncture maybe in the Indian sports scenario?
I don't think player agents, but we kind of double up for all those roles in some sense, because there are very few athletes in the Olympic space who actually get those kind of discussions going in that sense, right? It's changing now. You're getting a lot of brands who are keen to, endorse and work with these athletes. But from an education standpoint, I think we kind of double up. So from a legal standpoint, you're educating them on contracts. How do you really get, sometimes when there's money in front of the athlete, they would tend to just sign it up without even understanding what are the commitments towards taking that money. So I think we double up in a lot of places, at least at GoSports, thanks to having a law firm with us as our partners, we actually take help of all our lawyers who, come support our athletes in these aspects. So I think from that perspective, it is there. Also, our head of sports science is John Gloucester, who comes with a very different philosophy that he's brought to GoSports and our athletes in from the education standpoint. So over there, it's, even before any sort of treatment is given, we're actually sitting for almost 45 minutes and explaining to them what the entire process is going to be, sitting with the coach, sitting with the parents if required, and explaining so that they're completely aware of the decision that is being taken, which can impact performance and their future.
Yeah, last question.
Good afternoon, everyone. My question is for Mr. Mustafa. You say that it's difficult to scout the talent. So, what immediate steps you're taking to incentivize the athletes to come up and bring forth the talent actually?
Incentivize?
The players to come before and just show the skills. So, as you say, it's difficult to scout talent.
How are you trying to lure them?
The immediate steps what you're taking.
So I think more than attracting the athletes, I think now the word is out that there are organizations like us that exist and that support talented athletes. But more than the athletes themselves, it's the few select coaches that we work with on a more regular basis, whose initial foundation work we agree with, we feel that it is progressive, and whose eye we trust. And they're the ones that are our eyes and ears on the ground to suggest athletes that we should or shouldn't look at. And then there's a whole process that we go through in terms of screening and identifying these athletes, whether they are genuinely of the level that we would want to invest in them and support them. So as of right now, it's through the coaching network that's there in this system.
Thank you. Thanks, Mustafa. I'd like to thank everyone on the panel. I hope all of you had a good conversation and found out things about Indian sports and the importance of the sports non-profits and the government as well. Thank you very much. Thank you, Commander. Thank you very much.
Thank you all. Randan, if we can have you on stage.